session now.
This meeting is now being recorded.
Hello everyone, I am Ashley Klein of PreventConnect, and I want to welcome everyone to the first web conference in our PreventConnect Campus series to further the discussion around sexual violence and interpersonal violence prevention on college campuses from an intentional, strategic, and comprehensive framework. Today's web conference is on comprehensive prevention on campus. PreventConnect is a national program of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, sponsored by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The views and information provided in this web conference do not necessarily represent the official views of the U.S. government, CDC, or CalCASA. So I really love that we are starting off this series by looking at this idea of as a comprehensive approach to prevention. Sexual assault and interpersonal violence on campus is a really big and important topic right now that we're hearing a lot about in the media. We know that this violence obviously doesn't just happen on college campuses, and it's not even that it's a new issue on campus, but there's a lot of attention currently on how institutions are responding to sexual assaults, and there's also a lot of new energy around prevention. So with that, we do have some learning objectives for today. Our goal is that at the end of this web conference, we'll be able to describe what comprehensive prevention is, how partnerships can play a role in comprehensive prevention, and then to identify next steps to strengthen the work we are already doing on campus. We are joined by some fabulous prevention practitioners doing really wonderful work on campus. So I'm really thrilled to introduce you to our wonderful guest that we'll hear from later on. Lee Helmkin is a health educator from Georgia Institute of Technology. Lee, are you with us? Lee, have you joined us? Okay, well, Lee, if you have maybe muted your phone, we can't hear you. Rhonda Jackson is a counselor at Shepherd University in West Virginia. Hi, Rhonda. How are you?
We're doing great. We're excited to be here with you.
Excellent. We're excited to have you. Jessica Lanciano is also from Shepherd University. Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. And then we also have Katie Spriggs, who's also in West Virginia and a program manager from Shenandoah Women's Center. Hi, Katie.
Hi there. Happy to be here.
Yay. And Lee, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Lee. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So before we move on, I would really love to hear from our audience and get an idea of the different roles that we all play on campuses or with campuses. So if you would use the chat box and let us know what role you play on campus in terms of prevention. So are you a prevention educator, maybe a Title IX coordinator? Do you work with athletics? If you would let us know. So we have a sexual assault response coordinator, a counselor, campus advocate and prevention educator, Title IX coordinator, victim advocate. Wow, we have so many folks. If you see that text chat box is just going off. We have a lot of folks who are working, it looks like, prevention specialists, a nursing program, an educator in a nursing program, an advocate, a campus sexual assault coordinator, Title IX, a legal advocate and prevention specialist. We have some folks from, it looks like, community organizations who are maybe partnering with campuses. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And it's wonderful to be able to connect with each other and other practitioners, and so we hope that we will be providing a space where you can do that. So before I hand the podium over to our guests, I want to provide a little context around what I mean when we talk about comprehensive prevention. And to do that, I think it's really important to start again by acknowledging that this issue is really having a moment. And what I mean by that is that there's a spotlight in the media on campus sexual assault, but there's also more attention being paid by the federal government with reports coming from the White House, like the Not Alone report. We have books being written on this topic. Missoula is a great example of that. Student activists are doing a lot of wonderful work around organizing for prevention. And we even have pop culture with Grammy-nominated songs that reflect the issue of sexual violence on campus. So this is not to say that we haven't been working on these issues for years, but it is to say that today there are new conversations happening in the public, and that can be a little bit overwhelming when we're looking to prevent sexual and interpersonal violence. So with so much happening around the issue, I find that it can be very helpful to have a framework for planning our work. So CalCASA did a national scan in 2014 where we found that we believe there's really a three-pronged approach that can create the conditions needed to shift culture and prevent sexual, domestic, dating, and stalking violence on campus. So I'm going to touch on these briefly. First, programs and initiatives to prevent sexual violence and interpersonal violence really must be trauma-informed. Creating norms that concentrate on social, community, and institutional support for survivors is crucial to promoting a culture of intolerance for sexual violence. When programs aren't trauma-informed, they can actually reinforce harmful norms that support sexual violence. So for example, if we focus our prevention efforts only on how women should restrict their alcohol intake, that really reinforces the idea that women are responsible for protecting themselves against sexual assault. Using a trauma-informed approach sends a message that survivors on campus will be supported. We also know that prevention must include community collaboration and engagement. Sexual assault doesn't happen in a vacuum, and campuses can't solve this problem on their own, nor should they be expected to. Campuses are really part of a larger community, and students are part of that larger community as well. We know that many students live off campus, but all students spend time off campus. And so having community collaboration and engagement really honors that while also providing options for students. And then we're back to this idea about comprehensive prevention, which of course is what we're going to focus on for the next hour or so. So the key things that PreventConnect Campus is highlighting are that prevention needs to be intentional, strategic, and comprehensive. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. So what we mean by prevention needing to be intentional is that we really need to be thoughtful about our prevention efforts. Changing culture requires deliberate actions. So we know that prevention work takes time, and it also needs a plan. We spend a lot of time planning very technical aspects of campus sexual violence, such as Title IX compliance and the adjudication process, but prevention is also very technical and requires planning that will lead to change in a thoughtful, well-thought-out way. Prevention programs also need to have a strategy. Culture change is strategic. It doesn't just happen. All of our campuses are unique with different challenges and opportunities, and we really have to tailor our prevention efforts to those specificities. We also need to link prevention initiatives to other messages and activities on campus so that there's consistency. And now we're back to this idea of prevention being comprehensive. So prevention can't just be a single message a single time. Instead of sprinkling the campus with prevention efforts, we really want to saturate the campus. In order to create the change that we want to see, we need to saturate and not just sprinkle. So one thing that I want to mention is we actually have an e-learning unit on comprehensive prevention on campus, and we'll put a link to that in our chat box. But it's really helpful in situating the work that you're currently doing on campus. And one of the ways to do that is by mapping out your work into various categories or elements of comprehensive prevention. So for prevention to be comprehensive, it's really important for us to have advocacy programs, to have outreach and awareness happening, and it's even important for us to talk about risk reduction. But primary prevention is what will lead us to changing the conditions needed to prevent sexual violence. And it's also an area that often receives the least amount of attention and funding. We can also think about comprehensive prevention as programming that includes all forms of prevention. So in public health, we would call these forms of prevention primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention, referring to interventions before violence has occurred and the immediate and long-term responses after violence has occurred. It's not necessarily important that we become experts in this public health language, but it is really critical that our programs have all of these different forms of prevention included in them. Again, primary prevention is what's going to change the culture. So while these other forms are really about responding to a crisis that has already occurred, which is super important and necessary, if our main goal is stopping this violence from happening, we also need to focus on primary prevention. And then a third way to look at comprehensive prevention is to look at all levels of prevention. So the Social-Ecological Model is a public health framework for understanding prevention and the factors that influence sexual violence. And it really helps us visually see the complexities of factors. It helps us see the relationship between the individual, the relationship, community, and societal levels that put people at risk for experiencing or perpetrating violence, or protects them from experiencing or perpetrating violence. By looking at this model and using it as a guide for our prevention work, we can see how each level is influenced by the others. Comprehensive prevention really has to work along all of these levels in order for us to create change. If we get stuck working just at the individual level, it's not going to shift culture in the same way that working across all of the levels of the social ecology will. So in order to prevent violence in the first place, we really need to look broader. And I know that Lee is going to give us some really wonderful examples of what all of those levels look like in terms of prevention efforts on campus. This is another example of the social ecology model from the Not Alone report. It is slightly different. Go ahead and capture that. It is slightly different than the one that we just looked at because it has an organization level. But I really like this example because it shows what primary prevention efforts could look like on a campus at all levels of the social ecology model. And we'll go ahead and get a link to that in case you have not seen that. Okay, so I know, we know that you all are doing so many things across these different levels of prevention already. And so we really want to hear from you so we can see what our strengths are. So if you would let us know in the chat box what maybe prevention activities or strategies you're doing on campus that you feel are particularly strong. We're not really here to endorse any program, but instead we really want to share our knowledge and experience as preventionists working on college campuses. So if there's something that you're doing on campus that you feel is particularly strong, let us know. It looks like Heather is doing an active bystander initiative, a lot of bystander trainings. We have Deborah says that all students take a prevention test before they enroll. There's lectures to students on consent. Some of you are using Green Dot. There are lunch and learns with students, faculty, and staff that's facilitated on campus. Wonderful. There's so many different ways to do prevention on campus, and so it's great to see what we're all doing and things that you particularly feel are strong. And as we do these web conferences, we're really looking for other folks to feature. So if you feel like you're doing something particularly strong and creative on campus, please send me an email. We have sexual violence prevention program at every year level at high school. That's great, Dan. Orientation program. Marianne says that buy-in from administration, mandatory training for all students, athletics, and Greek system. So again, there's tons of stuff happening that we're doing well, and that's wonderful. So I am going to go ahead and turn the podium over to our first guest, Lee Helmkin of the Georgia Institute of Technology. I want to mention that Lee is also part of a new organization called Campus Advocates and Prevention Professionals Association, or CAPA, that is a really wonderful community and resource for campus professionals working to respond and prevent violence on campus. And we'll put a link to CAPA in the text box. Thank you, Lindsay. So, Lee, I'm going to give you the podium. And why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your campus in terms of student population and any characteristics that are important for us to know about Georgia Tech.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So hi all, I'm so thrilled to be part of this web conference and share a little bit about the work that we're doing here at Georgia Tech and my perspectives on this issue. For those of you who aren't familiar with Georgia Tech, we are a public research university located kind of in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia, so right in the city. We have about 25,000 students, about 15,000 of those are undergraduates. And we are a university focused on science, technology, engineering, and math. So we're a STEM-focused institution, and that really comes through a lot in our campus culture and our student perspectives and backgrounds and the work that they're doing on campus. I also think it's important to note that our campus is about 70% male-identified students, and so that's likely a lot higher than most of the institutions that y'all are working on or with. And so I think that's important to know about our campus community, and again, certainly comes through in some of the cultural aspects of our community. We also have a large international student population, about 20%, so a lot of different dynamics and things going on in our community. And so I'll just go ahead and get started. And first, I just want to definitely acknowledge the great work that I know all of my colleagues across the country on campuses and in communities are doing. And so certainly we're all in this together, and much of this is not going to be new to you. It's the work that you're doing, but I hope I can shed some light on some hopefully different perspectives or ideas in our work. I think it's just always great to hear new examples of things that are going on in our community as our initiative continues to grow and build, as do yours. So VOICE is our campus sexual violence prevention and response initiative, and so we're working to address this issue comprehensively on campus. So first I just wanted to pull out one of the resources, the many resources that exist on campus. Ashley acknowledged the Not Alone report that the White House put out in 2014. And so this is straight from that report, this list, and I think it emphasizes some of the important things that we should be keeping in mind in the work that we're doing. Recognizing that prevention is not just about one-time programs or raising awareness, but it's really backing up this primary prevention model. And so this last bullet at the end, is decreasing social norms that facilitate sexual violence, really needs to be at the root of what we're doing. So we can't do this work without strong policies and systems in place, being proactive on the front end and reacting appropriately and holding folks accountable when these issues do arise in our communities. But I think looking at how we change the culture and prevent violence before it happens, looking at those root causes, is what is so important, is what is actually going to lead us to see change on our campuses. So a little bit about VOICE, just to give y'all some perspective. Our initiative is based in our Office of Health Promotion on campus, and we address all forms of interpersonal violence, so sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, sexual harassment, all kind of under this umbrella of sexual violence. I lead our prevention and education efforts, and I work closely with our two victim survivor advocates in our campus, in our office, to coordinate VOICE. And basically, we believe everyone has the right to live, learn, and work in our community without the threat of violence. And so we seek to build a community founded on respect and equity and social justice, and ensure that when violence does occur, we're responding effectively and creating a community that stands with and supports our survivors. So we're working to ensure that our community knows the role that they have in being part of the solution to preventing violence, whether that's students, faculty, staff members, or administrators, and that we're not sweeping this issue under the rug in our community. As a note, VOICE is not actually an acronym. I know it looks like it is. People ask us that all the time. It's a name that we inherited and we just have continued to run with over the years. And so I think on webinars like this, it's always helpful just to have a little bit of background and perspective on the work that each campus is doing, because we are all so different. We all have such different histories in our communities. And so VOICE is a long-standing initiative at Georgia Tech. It's been around for over 20 years in different forms. Over a decade ago, we received a Department of Justice grant that really kick-started and institutionalized our structure. And what's important to note about the work we've done with VOICE is that up until this past summer, VOICE was a collaboration between Health Promotion and our Women's Resource Center, and that is where our advocacy services have previously been located, where our prevention and education was coming out of Health Promotion, and our offices work closely across divisions to do that work. Something that's really important in the work that we've done over the years alongside prevention is continuing to update our sexual misconduct policies, ensuring that it's a consent-based policy, that it's trauma-informed and survivor-supportive. We've also worked really intentionally to rebrand VOICE. So as you can see, it's been around for a long time, so wanting to create a visual identity for our initiative and a consistent presence in our campus community. And like many of your campuses and communities, we've seen some student activism rising up over the last couple of years, and that really led to increased attention from our administration to these issues and has led to some of our restructuring that moved VOICE entirely under the umbrella of Health Promotion and hired our campus's first full-time victim advocacy staff, where previously it had only been a component, though a large component, of the work that our staff in the Women's Resource Center was doing. And so this slide, there's a lot going on here, obviously, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it just shows this organizational map, an organizational overview that we created this past summer to kind of give folks a better perspective and to kind of pull together for ourselves the different aspects of the work that Voice is doing. So there's a lot here, but basically we're knowing that Voice is doing a lot of broad work, but sometimes it's hard to demonstrate that to our campus partners and to students, and so that really led us to put this together. So we have some signature programs under the Voice initiative. We have a peer education program that's been, is now in its 3rd year on campus. We have ongoing trainings in our Greek community called Safe Sister and Fraternity Men Against Violence. Obviously our orientation programming happens every year, and some key programs during April that we continue to do every year and are kind of the cornerstone of our work. Of course, survivor advocacy is a really important part in the work that we're doing on campus. And then additional trainings, and so that really looks at the targeted outreach and presentations we're doing, the awareness raising activities that may shift or change over time and occur in different ways and look different over time.
So Lee, it looks like you've really mapped out the work that Voice does on campus. Can you share how that's been helpful for you all?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we found is that even our close campus partners were not truly aware of the work that Voice was doing on all levels. So they might know about a program, or they might be part of a committee or an organization or attend one of our trainings, but they weren't really seeing the work we were doing across the social ecology of campus, the really comprehensive work and the different areas that we were involved in. And so mapping it out in this way allowed our partners to look at strategically at the work we're doing and at the way that our external partners play a role in that. So I'm going to share a little bit more about our campus collaborations through our Sexual Violence Prevention Alliance, but it's also really important for folks to see that we're working with external groups. So looking at our compliance colleagues in Title IX and clear reporting, different student groups that exist on campus. So this kind of creates a map to allow people to see where they might fit in within our work and the different opportunities for collaboration across different units. And so I mentioned our Sexual Violence Prevention Alliance, and I know a lot of y'all have different committees on campus, and so this is ours. And this has been really our way of bringing together campus stakeholders to address this work. It's been around in different forms for 20 years, but really now serves as a way to bring together our campus partners, keep them updated on the work that we're doing, relevant news in our community, as well as for us to stay in the loop about the ways that their work may overlap or support ours. We've definitely seen this committee grow over the last few years with consistent attendance, and we're now working with our colleagues in this committee and within a strategic planning process. We're also looking at ways to expand our membership to areas that are not currently represented. One challenge we have is engaging faculty on our committee, and so that's an intentional process we're engaging in. And I think some of these partners are pretty obvious. They're here because of this work being a function of their role on campus, but we're definitely seeing increased attendance and participation from colleagues across campus who are just there out of interest or passion, which is really wonderful. And so this group allows us to really work on that goal of consistent messaging and translating our practice throughout the campus community.
Great. So you talked a little bit about how some folks are here just out of, pure passion. Maybe this is an interest, something that they are very involved in anyways. But for the other folks who maybe you have to work a little bit harder, how are you able to establish these partnerships, and how have they helped you in your prevention efforts?
Absolutely, and I'll definitely acknowledge that we're really lucky in our community that many of our staff on campus are in this community, and we're truly collaborative and supportive of each other. And so it is often not a very tough sell for people to become involved in intentional ways with this work. And so I can recognize that we're really lucky for some of those great partnerships on our campus that may be more of a challenge for others. Many of these have been there since the beginning, but others we have worked to cultivate over time. And so finding intentional ways that we can partner or train or work to co-sponsor a program with different units on campus to make sure that they feel engaged and bought into our work. I think one thing that's really important about creating partnerships is making sure that those are mutually beneficial partnerships and relationships rather than just asking them to do something for us. having that mutual partnership where we can communicate with each other openly. So I look for ways in the campus community to support my colleagues that maybe is not at all related to violence prevention, but shows them that I'm committed and supported to their work as I'd like them to be with mine. So for example, I like to participate in interviews for our orientation leaders, or participate in Greek Week activities, just to show that support for campus. And I think sometimes those interpersonal relationships can go a long way in getting colleagues and buy-in for our work. And I think these relationships are really the way that we get our work done. They help us consider new perspectives and create buy-in, increase attendance and participation in our different events and programs, and also create unexpected pockets of people speaking out on these issues. That's not our voice initiative, but people who are passionate and raising these issues. So it's not just coming from us, and I think that that makes a big difference. And it's created some opportunities for unexpected partnerships, which has been really wonderful.
Great.
And so just to, I think, enforce how important I think collaborative work is, and I know that we all know this because we have to, by nature of our jobs, work collaboratively, but really recognizing that violence is not an isolated issue. As Ashley said, it's not happening in a vacuum, and it crosses over our divisions, over our areas, over our communities and organizations. And we really need multiple perspectives to solve this problem. And what I think is so great about this work is that we come from so many different areas. So my background is in public health, but I know my colleagues come from women's studies, or come from criminal justice, or come from social work, come from higher education. And so we're approaching this issue from so many different perspectives, and so I think that that really enhances and builds on our work. I think, as Ashley was talking about, consistent messaging and saturating our community with our message is really important. And so the only way to do that is to make sure that we are working with each other, and that we are not the only people on our campuses speaking out about these issues. We also recognize that there's always limited resources when it comes to any work on a campus or in community, and so being able to partner with each other, increase participation, and help each other to achieve our goals is so important, and really the only way that we're going to achieve our work and our goals in the long term.
Excellent. So I want to hear from our audience now about what kind of partnerships maybe you all have on campus, or that you're planning to establish on campus. So if you would use the text chat and let us know what partnerships have been helpful for you, or what partnerships do you, have in mind as part of your strategy for doing comprehensive prevention on campus. If you would let us know. Okay, let's see. So Kelly has a partnership between the area's shelter and police, as well as between campus life and VP offices, state coalitions. Casey says we have partnering with Title IX coordinator was key for Riley, working with athletics and Greek life, as well as the diversity and inclusion team. Let's see, the PD and other student affairs identity-based centers, says Joe. Looks like there are a lot of partnerships happening. Carrie has multiple relationships and contacts in different departments in all 5 colleges. That's great. Partnering really closely with the Dean of Students and University Police, working with the Counseling Center. There's a consortium in New Hampshire. Wonderful. Our Women's Center partners with all first responders on campus, where Lisa's at, and community groups. So there's that community collaboration piece. So it looks like there's a lot of really important partnerships. Women and Gender Studies Club. Sometimes, and Lee, I don't know if you would agree with this, but establishing those partnerships can kind of open the door for even more partnerships, because those folks that you're making relationships have relationships with other people on campus. And so it really can kind of start this domino effect of people getting involved.
Absolutely, and that's something that we have seen in our work, and the build of support for our work. And again, not being the only ones now having to speak out on these issues, we're seeing our consistent message come from different perspectives, and so that's been really wonderful, and it sounds like y'all are having that similar experience, which is great. So as Ashley was talking about in the beginning, the social-ecological model, I think, is one perspective to take when we think about primary prevention and being coordinated and comprehensive in our work. My background is in public health, and so this is a model that really resonates with me, and certainly there's other ways to approach this issue in our work on campus. But I do think that this model is really important in thinking about the ways that violence impacts the many different layers of our campus communities and the pockets and unique communities that exist within our larger campus culture. And so for those of you all who aren't familiar, the CDC and the Division of Violence Prevention has some really great resources on this, which I think is always great to look back on just in a larger public health model if that's not your background. And I think what's so important is that this model allows us to look at effective strategies beyond just one-time education and raising awareness, but really creating space and opportunity to involve the entire campus community. So going back to the systems that we have in place to saturate our community with our messaging and our support systems. And I always say in programs, like I've said, that if I'm the only person who's getting up and speaking out about prevention and speaking about these issues, I'm probably never going to make it very far. But if we're working together, if students are starting to initiate these conversations within their own social context, if everybody on campus is recognizing that they have a role and a stake in this issue, we're actually going to start to see